Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm so happy you're with us today. There are so many wonderful people working in the field of afterlife research and education now, and I've made so many friends at this point who are into even the second generation of stars working in this field. Our guest today is one of them. He's Mark Ireland, who is with us for the fourth time. His father was the prominent 20th century medium Richard Ireland, and since the gift often runs in families, it's not surprising that Mark has inherited it. He's also a gifted medium in his own right. And in addition, Mark Ireland is a co-founder of Helping Parents Heal, which is a wonderful organization. I think they're close to, we'll have to ask Mark, close to 30,000 members now. They assist bereaved parents worldwide, and they do such a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing for people because I've known many people who have been part of helping parents heal. And it's something which, if you have not lost a child, you cannot imagine the pain of it, and they help so many people. He's participated as well in mediumship research studies conducted by the University of Arizona and the University of Virginia, great, great institutions. And he operates a medium, we'll have to ask if he still does this. He operates a medium certification program. He's the author of two terrific books, Soul Shift, and I especially loved The Persistence of the Soul. Mark, welcome. I'm so glad you're back with us today.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me today. And to answer the question you posed in there about the membership of Helping Parents Heal, it is at last check about a year ago. I knew it to be 31,000, but it's probably closer to 35,000 now because it just keeps growing at a rapid rate.
Yeah, I'm not surprised because people who know about it, or even people who have a friend who've lost, I mean, I have recommended it myself whenever I know of someone or I'm contacted by someone who've lost a child. You need that kind of help through the process of even learning to cope with the fact and contacting a medium who can help you stay in touch with your child. All kinds of things, of great things come out of that organization. It's wonderful. It's beautiful.
Yeah, we're the reason we exist and why we've grown so fast, quite frankly, is because we're the only organization of our type that allows open discussion of spiritual experiences and afterlife evidence. It's not it's not the only thing that people need in their grieving process to move forward, but it is a key component. It's kind of the hope piece. And the others, if they don't have that, folks kind of get stuck in a rut often where they can't move forward and it just becomes more about, venting about what happened and talking with the people and that's valuable too to have those relationships and we offer that as well. But the hope piece seems to make a very big difference. It doesn't seem to, it does make a very big difference.
Huge, huge. Because healing and going forward with your life, with the reality that is your reality now, is extremely important.
Right. If we're here for a purpose, which I think we are, and each of us has our own, if we end up, down in a hole and we stop living that purpose, then that's a real tragedy. It's like a second tragedy on top of the first one.
Oh,
So,
beautifully said. Exactly right. In my life, helping people who have businesses to run their business. I'm a business attorney. That's been my profession. I have seen people who have lost a child become so stuck in that moment when they lost their child that even though they have a business to run, even though they think their life has gone on. I mean, I remember one in their living room, in the middle of the living room, they had a tripod, and on it was a portrait of the child they had lost, gigantic portrait, took up the whole middle of the living room. When did that child die, you ask? 20 years or before that, the day I visited them at their home. And that portrait still was the whole middle of their living room.
yeah.
That's
Well,
obscene. To me, that is obscene. It's unfair. They had other children. It's unfair to the other children. It's unfair to themselves that they can't get past that moment when they lost that child.
yeah, one thing that someone told me early on was be thankful for what you have, not be just, despondent about what you don't have. And if you have other children too, It's like I've asked some people like, well, how would you feel about this if it was the other child that passed, you know? So I think it's whoever, and I think we tend to really focus on those who pass, so oftentimes more than those who are still here in the physical body too. You can have a relationship with those who continue on. It may sound absurd to some folks, we're just have a materialistic mindset, but it's true. It's just different, you know. And the other thing is this is a pretty short ride for all of us. So I think the thing is you just have to recognize that you're not going to be without them forever. You'll be with them again in a more complete way after you transition. But for now, you got work to do. So it's about finding the tools that are necessary for that for each person to be able to cope with the situation, accept it, and move forward. And so, I think Helping Parents Heal does provides a lot of those things to help folks with that.
And the fact that there is a focus on trying to stay in touch with the child through mediums, at least at one contact where you are certain that the child was contacted, the child says, I'm okay, mommy. I'm fine. You go on with your life. I'll see you soon. That kind of a contact is so liberating for the parent.
Yeah, and that could be, I mean, we have people who provide workshops or even Zoom meetings on ways to try and have a direct connection, which is even can be even more meaningful. It's just
Right.
that when people have that, they'll often question, like, well, was that my imagination or was that real? You know?
Yes.
And that's where, having a good mediumship reading can be helpful.
Right.
And that's why I vet mediums through that certification program you mentioned. And yes, it is still continuing. Initially, after my first book, Soul Shift, came out, I was barraged with questions from people like, "Oh, I'd like to have a medium reading. Who should I go to?" And at that time, I knew maybe 4 to 6 really good mediums, but some of those were like celebrities, and they had really long wait lists, and others
Yes.
charged more than some people could afford. And I thought to myself, there have to be people who can do this that are, don't have, they're lesser known, so they don't have long wait lists. They charge less because they're just, maybe not further as far along in their process. So that's why I started it. And then I would put them through a battery of tests in blinded readings to ascertain if they really have that ability or not, and at what degree, and establish thresholds that someone would have to achieve or surpass in order to be certified. And so today, this is over 10 years I've been doing this. I have over 40 on there now and Helping Parents Heal I think it was a few years after I started adopted using my program, which is still independent from HPH because there are mediums on my site that are not HPH providers. But any new medium that wants to be a HPH provider has to go through that process and be vetted because, quite frankly, the folks that we deal with are in grief, and especially the new ones, they're very fragile. So
Yes.
I found, like you said, a good evidential mediumship reading can be a very healing thing, but one that's a flop can kind of set people back further. So while it's never guaranteed, this increases the odds that they would have a good session.
Yeah, no, it makes a tremendous difference. But you're right. If the reading is not good, it can be, or if it's, gee, you lost your child, and then it's just a bunch of generalities. Gee, you really loved your child, didn't you? Is not a very, or your kid is saying, oh, I'm fine. He wants to go play now. That's not a very helpful me reading either.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've done is modified the protocols repeatedly over the 10-year span. And now I think I've really finally dialed it into the best possible thing. And we'll see because I'm testing people right now with the new protocols. But initially it was more about accuracy, strictly accuracy,
Hmm.
but now I've shifted it more towards accuracy plus evidence. And I valued the
Evidence is
evidence,
good.
but the methodology I had before didn't place enough emphasis on the evidence. So, just as an example for people listening, a medium could say, I've got your grandmother here and she loved to cook. Okay, that may be true and it's accurate because, many grandmothers love to cook.
And many
But
don't, like me.
Right. But if they say your grandmother's here and she loved to make lasagna on Christmas, okay, if that was true, that's evidential because
That's
you've got
very
something very a
evidential. Yeah.
specific piece of information there that resonates with the family and was true. that's where we've gone with this to, more
Right, that's
focus on
very
that.
right. Very specific, unlikely to be anybody, just anybody, but more likely to be that specific grand. That's
Mhm.
right. Yeah, that's very important. The one that got me, with a very, very evidential medium, said that this, I think I have your mother, but why does she keep pointing to her eyebrow? Well, my mother's eyebrows were non-existent. So she painted them on. She painted these big strips of on her. She knew I would recognize immediately that nobody else but my mother, my children's grandmother, would have pointed to her eyebrows immediately because it was
Uh-huh.
a family secret. She didn't have any eyebrows, and she was always upset about that fact. So I never looked again. That was 20 years ago. I never again tried to get a reading from my mother. I never needed to. I knew that was my mother for sure. That's the kind of evidence we look for from our recently deceased loved one. You get one piece of evidence like that that could have been nobody else, and that's all you need. That's all you need.
Yeah, and I think, I do discourage people from becoming medium junkies because I've seen people do that.
There's
And
no
they'll just get
point
one
to it.
after another, and it's not
No,
good.
just one. You
It's not
need one
helpful.
piece of critical evidence, and that's it. Then you're at peace.
Yeah.
She's fine.
And some people, they will have one periodically, and that's fine. But I just think you don't want to be a crutch for you. You want it to be a helpful tool that is used in the right way. And learning how to have your own connection. Really, that's something I did. That was really the first connection I had to my son Brandon after his passing was direct, and it was something that I could have been skeptical about because I could have said, like I mentioned before, hey, maybe it's just my imagination, but I got a key piece of information, which was something I
Mhm.
didn't know and had to research afterward.
Really?
So, yeah,
Okay.
this is just days after he passed. I went into a darkened walk-in closet, sat down quietly, and tried to get into a meditative state and just asked for a connection with my son. And it didn't take very long before I saw his face scroll across like my mind's eye, like this is a screen or something. And he was smiling and glowing like a joyful glow, which felt really good. And I thought, oh, that's great. And that's all I really expected. But then right after that was a cross with an oval loop at the top. And I'd seen people wear those, but I didn't really know what they were. I'd never really looked into that. So after I had that experience, I went over to my computer, I Googled cross with oval loop, and I got the Ankh, which is the oldest cross of human history. It's 5,000 years old, approximately, with the Egyptian culture, with the lower portion representing physical life and the oval loop representing eternal life.
Oh,
So I got what I felt was a puzzle piece, a symbol that I had to decode to tell me that my son was in eternal life and he was joyful. And had I already known what that Ankh meant or what it was, then I probably would have dismissed it more because I would have felt like my own mind was generating that just to make me feel good. But no, I got that piece of evidence.
wow.
So that was pretty cool.
Well, I knew your sister had died, but wait, what about when did your son die? How old was he?
So actually, it was 2004 in January, and he was hiking the hills or the mountains behind our home in Scottsdale at the time. And we were across town, and we got a distress call from one of his friends, actually my other son, because their friends on the mountain with him had called our other son who was at work. He called me, and then I had heard, he had been passing out and not feeling good, so they needed help. So I called 911 and I urged them to send a helicopter. And by the time, we got there to the base of the mountain, there were a horde of spectators, an ambulance, fire truck, and then
Oh,
this helicopter had come down. I told the police officer who I was, and then he introduced me to a chaplain, which was pretty discouraging. As soon as they did that, I knew that's not good. So the chaplain sat with us for a little bit. He kind of hemmed and hawed, and then finally I just said, "Did my son pass?" And he said, "I'm sorry, yes, he did." And then I just hugged my wife, and we both just broke down. And I thought, my God, am I going to ever experience joy again? Am I ever going to want to live? How can I go forward from this?
wow. How
And
old was he?
pardon?
How old was he?
18. Yeah.
Oh, my Lord.
So it was, that experience I described was just a few days afterwards. But really what helped me, a lot of people have a religious faith and that's great, but that's kind of a blind faith. But I had growing up with the father that I had, I saw the evidence of there being more in the survival of consciousness after physical death.
Right.
And by that point, my dad had been gone a number of years, but my uncle in Tucson was still around and he had similar abilities. So I had called him and he said, "Well, let me know what I can do for you." And I just said, "Well, if you can get any kind of message or anything, I would really appreciate if you could make a connection." And it was on the third day, I believe, when I was in the mortuary, we connected by cell phone, and he said, "Hey, Mark, I tried really hard last night to make a connection, but I didn't get anything. However, this morning I did my morning meditation, and your dad came to me." And at that point, we didn't know Brandon's cause of death. We only knew what the boys had told us. But my uncle said, your dad came to me and he said Brandon's death was caused by a lack of oxygen that caused his heart to fail. Lack of oxygen in his bloodstream that causes heart to fail. And he said, Brandon said you're the best parents he ever could have had, which is the nice fuzzy thing. 2 days later, I talked to the physician who had done the autopsy, and she said your son's death was caused by a severe asthma attack that drove his blood oxygen levels down, causing cardiac arrest. So my uncle gave me that 2 days before, so I got evidence from my uncle in addition to the feel-good statement. So that kind of really was the catalyst for putting me back on this path to write these books, to do the research, to meet the researchers in the field today, to meet top mediums, to start a certification program, to do podcasts, and to do all this stuff that I probably never would have done because I was just going along in a business career and just focused on
Yeah.
that. So I think it was a tragedy that caused me to follow what was probably really my life calling, and that resulting in something like, me co-founding Parents Heal along with Elizabeth Boyson to help thousands and thousands of people. And I've had many, many people either approach me by email or in person saying, "I want to thank you, you saved my life."
My dear, there are so many tragedies that are the fount of so many good things. And here
Yeah,
is just another one of those tragedies.
yeah. Now, whether that was, some people read the book. I just had a woman in India recently who, when her son passed, she was going to take her own life. And then she wrote that she read Soul Shift, my first book, and that
Yes.
it changed everything. And actually, she ended up becoming a medium and a very good one at that, which is really surprising. But I think that's not a super common thing, but sometimes a parent will change the path of their own life too to either maybe they become an affiliate leader for helping parents heal, or they might expand their own spiritual awareness into areas beyond what they had considered previously. Or some they start a foundation. Like one woman in Florida, her son passed from a failed liver and she got him a transplant, but the transplant only lasted so long. So she got into organ donation foundation. Another, cancer research for a specific type of cancer that their child passed from. So you're right. I mean, it could be a catalyst for a lot of things. So
Oh,
it's just
yeah.
interesting life in this world. You're going to have everybody's going to suffer at some point over something. And so it's what you do with that suffering and how you respond to it. That's really the most important thing.
And what you just said was a mouthful. How do you respond to the tragedy? The way you respond to the tragedy means everything. You and your son are partners in so much wonderful work. Think of that. Isn't that wonderful? That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Not only was his life not for nothing, but his life was a great gift to the world because of what you've done, all the things you've done that are so wonderful for the world.
Well, it's interesting too, all the synchronicities that took place after that, where things just lined up in very unexpected ways. So this path just kind of unfolded. I didn't have to work that hard to do this. It just kind of fell in my lap along the way.
Yes,
And
it
it
was
really
all
was
meant
just
to be,
about
meant to
following that
be.
path,
Yes,
recognizing those opportunities and those connections when they happened.
yes. How beautiful that is.
I think, for those who've heard me talk before, some of these stories are redundant, but they bear telling again for those who haven't heard. But like one of the early ones was about 3 weeks afterward. It was a February 2004. I was watching the news that on the NBC affiliate in Phoenix, and they were showing this mediumship research study being done, single blind tests at the University of Arizona. And the test medium was Alison Dubois before she got big from the network show Medium. And she was having to do a reading for a family who was not visible to her. She was separated from them. And I was really impressed with the specificity of the information. And then they recapped it at the end with the family and found out, what was correct and the relevance of all of it. And it was really, she did a great job. It was not just willy-nilly stuff. It was like, okay, he loved to go to play craps at Vegas and all this kind of stuff. And
Wow.
sure enough, that was right on the money. And
Yeah.
so I thought to myself, boy, I'd love to get a reading from her. I'd love to be in that lab someday. And I was in that lab in about a year from that point. But the very next day after seeing that, I get a call from a man named Jerry Concert, who had been friends with my father. He lives in Dallas or lived in Dallas, Texas. And he said, "Hey, Mark, I know what you've been through, and I know someone who might be able to help you. Her name's Allison Dubois, and here's a phone number you can call to get a reading."
Wow.
So
Yeah.
that was like one of the early ones. Like, okay, thank you,
Yeah.
Dad.
Wow.
You know,
Yes.
um, and ironically, Jerry actually just passed last August this year, or in 24. He was going to come to the Helping Parents Heal conference, but he got sick with a respiratory infection just before that, and he had emphysema, and he did not make it physically. Um, but I just saw his wife last week and his family members and that's why I went to San Antonio because there was a celebration of life for him. And she chose April because that was his birth month and his favorite month of the year. So while there, though, I met other people, including one man who knew my father and had some great stories that I just got. I've been collecting these over the years to include in a forthcoming book about my dad, what it was like
Great.
growing up with him, but not just my stories, but the stories from these other people. This was
Wonderful.
a man was a geologist, hardcore scientist, and he had a couple experiences with my dad that just blew his mind and opened it wide up, blew it open. And now he totally knows that there is another side to this life and it
Of course.
continues on.
Of course. Oh, wonderful. But all of these things are such proof that, I mean, not all gifts are fun to receive. In fact, many of gifts are not fun to receive, but that doesn't make them any less gifts.
No, no. And then there's a part two to the Alison Dubois thing. So that was part one, kind of where Jerry had connected me with her one day after I'd seen this excerpt. It's like, okay, this is like manna from heaven. It's exactly what I need. But
Yeah.
she was very popular at the time, even though the show hadn't come out yet. So it took me until August, from February to August, to get the actual reading. And it was 2 weeks before the reading that a man who knew my father handed me a box, and inside the box was a typewritten manuscript called Your Psychic Potential, a Guide to Psychic Development by Richard Ireland, Dr. Richard Ireland, dated 1973. And I said, "Where'd you get this?" He goes, "Well, your dad gave it to me for safekeeping before he passed because you were out of state at the time." And I said, "Okay, well, but that's 12 years ago. Why are you giving it to me now?" He says, "I don't know. I just feel like I'm supposed to." And I said, "All right."
Wow.
Well, 2 weeks later, I meet with Allison. And one of the earliest things in the reading she said to me was, "Well, your father's here. He's showing me a book, but I don't think it's your book. I think it's his book. And he's handing it to you to take forward. Does that make sense to you?" And I'm like,
Wow, it
"I
certainly
think I
does.
understand." And then in 2011, I actually got it published on my dad's behalf.
Look at that. Look at that.
So
Wow.
in a way, I helped keep his legacy going too.
Right. Right, right. Well, how was it? You're going to write a book about him now. How was it to grow up with someone who could read your mind? You're telling me that you got your homework done, but I'm thinking you didn't. I can tell you, I can believe that you didn't do your homework because I'm psychic. Remember that? Did you have that kind of a problem with him?
Yeah, Dad. First off, he in his own mind thought he tried to not use it too much because he wanted us to have normal lives, but he did use it. Now, it was more an impediment to my older brother because my parents split when I was like 11. So I didn't live with my dad all the time at that point. So it wasn't as hard on me during my teenage years as it was with my older brother. But I know um, there's an incident where somebody was buying him beer when he was underage, and my dad stopped that. And then he would drag race his car, and then my dad would stop that. And my brother once said to him, "How would you like to have a dad like you?" I know early in my parents, this is a story I tell a lot. Early in my parents' marriage, my mother, for a several month period, had become a vegetarian, and she'd done really well at this. But then one day she just had to have a hamburger, so it was driving her batty, and she ran out and got a burger and came back home. And then by the time Dad came home later that day, he comes in the door, the first words out of his mouth are, "So, Shirley, how did you enjoy your hamburger today?" So that kind of stuff.
Never
But for
marry a
me,
psychic. Never marry a psychic.
I just remember Dad kind of knowing what was going to happen, and he would talk about things that had transpired. He had a strong precognitive ability, clairvoyant, telepathic, all the full range, you know. So it is what it was. But he had his own church too. He was a minister. He started out in the spiritualist church, NSAC. He went to Morris Pratt Institute and was ordinated there. But later on, I think that even that was too dogmatic for him and too confining. And really, what he wanted was a place where people could come and kind of self-explore, not so much just preach to them. Although he did give sermons, a lot of them based on Jesus's teachings and the like. But I think, more so he was trying to, he would incorporate the gifts of the Spirit, as described by the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. So he wanted to say, okay, a lot of churches talk about this stuff, these miracle stories or these gifts of the Spirit, but no one does them anymore. Well, at our church, we do them. And here, we're going to show that this is still a real thing. It's alive. And that was a big part of his church, was demonstrating that as part of just, we're not just a body and a brain, we're more than that. And also that we can continue on as a soul or a spirit, whatever term you choose. But then he graduated, or I'd say moved on into the secular world too, and did demonstrations at a lot of other venues and places where people would never set foot in a church would get to see that, and it would open their minds up. Television. I've got clips of him on the Steve Allen show from 1971 doing a
Steve
demonstration.
Allen. Oh my
That's
goodness.
so if anyone wants to see that, if they go to my site, markirelandauthor.com, they will find on the home page, I think it's the lower left, you'll see it says see Richard Ireland in action. That will take you to those videos of my dad on the Steve Allen show.
MarkIrelandAuthor.com. Okay.
Yeah. So my dad was an unusual man, and he was way ahead of his time, and he was a medium at a time when it probably wouldn't have been acceptable at all. So
Yeah.
even doing the psychic work, anytime he was doing that, pretty much in a secular venue or on TV, it was all about the psychic stuff. And then he had to combat, because most of the people who would go on TV and do anything similar to him were, called themselves mentalists, and they probably were, they were involved trickery or whatever. But he boldly said, "No, I'm psychic. I was born psychic." And he would tell the story about when he was 5 years old. He was born cross-eyed. He was taken to the Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio, for corrective surgery. After the surgery, his eyes were cupped and bandaged to heal, and a nurse had put him into a bed and strapped him down, but felt sorry for him and said, "Okay, I'll let you up, but you have to promise not to touch the bandages." And she went on about her rounds, came back to find him bouncing a ball against the wall and catching it. She thought he'd removed the bandages, but he hadn't. And that was even more startling. And then she pulled some doctors in to witness this, and then they did some voice throwing exercises while he was in bed, like putting one doctor at the foot of the bed and another at the doorway and asking him who was standing in front of him, and he would get it right all the time. So this is just an innate ability that he was born with, and
Right.
it just
Of
progressed
course.
beyond that. So Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is something that it's important that everyone understand. This psychic ability of the sort that you and your dad have is primarily heritable. It's something that's genetic. And most people wonder, can I learn this? I'm not sure you can. I think it's something that truly is heritable
So
and
yeah, I
only
think the people
heritable.
that research this do say, hey, it runs in families.
It does.
Dr. Julie Beischel at Windbridge Research Center, she has said that. I've heard it from numerous people, and I've seen it.
Mhm.
In my dad's family, his mother had this. His grandmother on his father's side had it, so he got it from both sides. On my mother's side,
It's especially strong, I must tell you.
yeah,
That turned out to be true. It's especially strong if you have it on both sides.
and my mom had it at least on one side. So yeah, it's come down, and I've had episodes of it. And although you said I'm a medium, I'm not. Let's put it this way: I'm a non-practicing, sporadic medium. So I'll get stuff on a sporadic basis, but I've never sought to, be a consultant for people in that way. Um, could I do it? Maybe if I focused on doing that.
You
I've kind
practice
of
with it.
enjoyed the journalistic path I've taken, where I'm kind of like this uh, observer of things and reporter of things, um, and even my own experiences. But I haven't really taken that step to try and be that full time. And my dad and I are very different people too. Um, and it's okay to be yourself, I think, you know?
Absolutely right. It's good to be yourself. It's good to figure out who you are supposed to be, who you feel led to be. Absolutely right. Very important. But I think it's remarkable. I think your son is probably guiding you in a direction, in or helping with your spirit guides to guide you in a direction that you might not have taken had you stayed on this side of the veil. Um,
Yeah, it would have been too easy just to continue along that path and putting a lot of value in stuff that is not that important. I mean, from a worldly perspective, it is, but really from an eternal perspective, it isn't. But at the same time, it was valuable too because I remember there's a medium in England, Linda Williamson, who is really phenomenal. She's retired now, but I met her early on, probably shortly after the Alison Dubois reading. And she had told me a couple things. One, she said, well, you're in your business life, your business world, and you think it's not that important spiritually, but she said it actually is because you'll meet a lot of people and connections there, that you'll be able to help. And also, I think, it helped help me be able to present this information in a way that's palatable to people that are average, normal people, walking down the street that would not normally accept it if it was presented in too woo-woo of a fashion, if you know what I mean. Um,
yes.
a more grounded way of presenting it. Say, hey, look, I'm just like you. I've lived this kind of mainstream lifestyle, but this stuff is real. And let me explain to you why I'm saying that and give you some examples. So I think she did a valuable thing by sharing that, to steer me in that direction. I remember there was a man too who shortly after Brandon passed, we had a meeting in Phoenix, and he was from LA, and we had probably, I don't know, 20 or 30 people at this training. And he was going on about how he was so disappointed and angry with his son because his son had gotten a girl pregnant and blah blah blah. And I said, well, my son just passed, I'd trade places with you in a heartbeat.
Oh, sure.
And then he's like, oh, and his jaw just dropped. And then he got back in touch with me a few weeks later. He says, I want to let you know that what you said to me really had an effect. He says, I've made peace with my son and we're in good stead now. So just from that one thing, he reevaluated the way he looked at that. It's how he chose to look at that situation and the value of having that son in that loving relationship, even though he disapproved of what had happened. Nonetheless, he still had that son, and he could make the best of that circumstance if he chose to.
What a profound story.
The
Oh, I'm so mad
also
at my
Linda
son.
Williamson,
Oh, look what he did. What a terrible son. Oh, he's so terrible. I can't even stand him. Oh my. Well, I would trade in a heartbeat because my son is no longer with me.
yeah,
Ooh, okay. I'm thinking hocus pocus, change the focus.
yeah.
Okay.
The other thing
Home and
Linda
he
said,
eats with his son. What a difference that made when you said that to him.
yeah,
Wow.
it just made him really think about things at a much deeper level, at a different level. But the other thing Linda said that was interesting, back then she said, I see you creating this organization, a very large thing, and uh, it will be worldwide and it will have thousands of people. And you don't really need to do anything other than be yourself and just tell your truth. And I had no idea what this would be. And she says, things happen in their own time, and sometimes we think it should happen quicker than it does. And for several years after that, I kept waiting. Well, what is this thing? What is it? What is it? And then here it is today, 2 decades later, and it's obviously helping parents heal.
Yeah, and it's a very important organization simply for the fact that the focus is on healing.
Yeah.
This is a bad thing that's happened in a parent's life, but the child is still alive. That's the important thing. They've gone to the next stage of life, but you're going to see them again. They're healthy, they're happy, they're in God's hands. Okay, that's bad because we can't hold them in our hands, but we put them into God's arms. What could be more comforting to a mother or a father than that?
Do you know Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll? Have you heard of him?
No.
So he's an ER doctor in Utah, and he's had this ability when people would come into the trauma center and whether they were near death or whatever, but he would actually be able to connect with, as a medium would, with their loved ones who are on the other side and get information. And there was a particular man who is driving and got into an accident. He and his wife and 2 children were in the vehicle, and he had a near-death experience during this because he left his body. And during that, his wife and one of the children, he saw them, out of body. And the wife told him, "Take care of our other child." And then when he was awoken physically, it was he and the one other child that had survived, it turned out. And when they were taken to the ER, this Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll was there, and he was able to communicate telepathically with the deceased wife. And that forged a friendship between those two people.
Of
But
course.
he had a pretty unique description of how this works that was pretty cool, I thought. And he said, like, when people are being born into this world, there's could be sadness on the other side because you have people there that are saying goodbye to that person temporarily while they
A
come in
little while.
to inhabit a body. And then when they're leaving here, there's sadness while they go in and they're born into the next phase of their existence.
Yep.
So I thought that was an interesting way of looking at it.
It's easier for them because they can still see us while we're going through our brief lives here.
Yeah.
It's easier for them. But still, as you say, they're out of touch with us for a little while we're here. But these lives are so short.
Yeah. Some shorter than others too.
But you have to be, older, as we are a little bit older, to look back on our lives here and say, oh, that's been so short. It's like, well, almost why did we bother to come? It's such a short life.
Yeah. When you're in
And
your
it
teens or 20s, it seems like you're
seems
going to
like,
live
oh, I got
forever.
forever. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can waste 20 years. Who the heck cares? But oh, it's such a short, precious lifetime here.
You don't
Really
want to waste it.
don't waste any minutes of it. No. But the beautiful thing is, when you have a child in your arms, it's not your child. I remember holding newborns in my arms and saying, wow, but this is not my child. It's a different person for me. I can see that even though the cord was just cut.
Mhm.
And they are not our children, they're God's children.
You're
And
on
so
alone.
he wants them a little early. We know God loves them even more than we ever could.
Yeah.
But that's why I love, well, I remember when Helping Parents Heal was founded, and I remember the whole philosophy of it. I was one of the first speakers they had
Mhm.
at their earliest meetings, where you could fit all the members in a room.
Yep.
And the whole philosophy was so positive and so life affirming. And I loved that. And it's never changed. It's that same organization. We'll put the website, the URL into the meeting notes to this conversation we're having, so that anyone who wants to contact them can. But I strongly recommend this group, because they are so supportive and so positive. For people who have lost a child, there could be no better place to go to meet people who are going to be able to help you to get on with your life without in any way disrespecting or ever doing anything but honoring and loving your own child who's gone ahead a little bit, just a tiny few minutes before you will join them. Beautiful group,
We have
beautiful.
some subgroups now too that have kind of spun off that are part of our organization, but just for more specific subgroups. And one is helping siblings heal. So those kids whose brother or sister passed, there's a group for them.
Wonderful.
And now the one that's really took forever to get off the ground was helping fathers heal. And the reason that it took so long, I think, is because a lot of men are really closed off and can't really have a hard time sharing their feelings
Mhm.
and feel like they have to suck it up and be tough. But we started that group a number of years ago, and it took a while to get off the ground, but now it's really flourishing. So men that feel they have no place to go could check that out and talk with other men who have had a child pass and can be totally open and say what they want to say and share with others. It's become kind of this brotherhood thing that's been very, very helpful. So all of that's at helpingparentsheal.org. And there's a lot of videos there too. We have all kinds of speakers and presenters and some mediums that have done gallery readings or talks. So all of those are on our YouTube channel. And if somebody wants to join us on Facebook, they can, but they just have to show that they are truly a parent who has been through this, because we've had other people just try and become members. It's a private group, even though we have over 30 some thousand people on it, but it's private so that people could share openly and not and know that there's nobody there for the wrong reasons. In the Facebook group, uh, we would have before people would try and join that we're just trying to market to the group or whatever. So it's a safe place now.
That's wonderful. That's just so special. Oh, but I enthusiastically recommend them, because they hit just the right notes for people who really need to hear that song. It's just perfect for that. So, all right, you're working on this book about your dad, which I think is a great idea. And does it bring back memories now that you had sort of it opens up your past too? It must be about going back into your own past as well.
Yes, it has opened up some or brought back some, but I already shared a lot in my first two books. So it's like, man, how much more do I have to share? But I found, I did call more of them. And then I also had the idea of sharing the experiences other people have passed along to me from all the years of my dad's work. And like I said, when I was at Jerry Conser's celebration of life a week ago, this past weekend, I met a man, this geologist, who shared a couple of his. And his was really remarkable. I'm definitely going to incorporate that. There were two that he shared, but one was his grandmother had this nickname for him that was really unusual. And when my dad was doing a demonstration during the middle of this, my dad shared that nickname and just said, "Who is this?" And he said the nickname. Is there anyone out there this name? And and the man's like, "Oh my gosh." He says, "Yeah, that resonates." And he says, "Well, your grandmother Maria says that she loves you and she's just saying hello." And that was his grandmother's name. So I've got a bunch of those. Some that are pretty unusual too, that go beyond just the mediumship stuff, but like that really make you think about the nature of time. For example, I was doing a talk after my first book came out, And just before I started, a woman approached me and said, "Hey, Mark, I've got a story to tell you about your dad." And she actually handed me, she had already typed it and handed it to me, but she says, "I'll tell it to you as well." And she said, "I saw your dad the first time in 1963. And, at his demonstration, he would tape his eyes, which he did with 10 strips of Johnson medical tape, which is a very strong adhesive and seals, and it's completely opaque.
Wow.
And then you put three black blindfolds over that and more tape down here so no one could say that he would peek downward or whatever. So really, there's no chance of him seeing. But even if he could see, it wouldn't matter. I mean, if you could see it, he shared the things that he did that were beyond what was written on the billets or the papers. You know
Wow.
that this is for real. So this woman, she says, your dad asked us to write a question. So I was trying to think in my mind what to ask. And she said, should I ask? She's thinking, should I ask, will I get my master's degree? Or should I ask, will I have a fourth child? So she only wrote the question about the master's degree. She sent it up. And my dad at the end answered her and said, yes, you'll get your master's degree. And then she later did. But then she said it was 5 years later she saw my father again. And this time she wrote an entirely new question. She sent the new question up and she couldn't remember what it was, but it was something new and different. And then he got her paper and he says, oh, Norma Poling, I see you had that fourth child. And that was the thing that she'd only thought of 5 years earlier, but never wrote down.
Oh,
So
wow.
it just shows you how little we understand about the nature of consciousness and time and all these kinds of things.
Plus, your father is very playful by nature, apparently.
Oh yeah, he is definitely playful. He's always been playful. Yeah. He's quite a character.
So I see.
Yeah.
Did your mother have it? You said your mother had some of this too.
It was on my mother's side. I can't say that my mom was particularly strong. She would have feelings and things, but I think more so her sisters. One sister in particular, Gloria, my older aunt, she would demonstrate that. It would come through. But with her it was more just for guidance and intuition, I think, or she would feel like, um, it was just a comfort for her, I think, to feel like she was close to God and she would have, intuitive guidance basically more than anything, I think. And it was interesting how my parents met too, because my mom at the time, she'd been married once before. She had a son, Donald, who was from the first marriage, and that's my dad adopted Donald. He's the one that had the issues when he was a teenager. I was telling you about where all of his fun was curtailed because of my
Oh,
dad's
poor
psychic stuff.
guy.
But my mom was living in LA and she apparently met with a psychic over there. And the psychic said, I see you moving to Phoenix and marrying the man of your dreams or whatever. And it was, I'm not sure the time frame, probably less than a year. She came to Phoenix because my grandparents were in Phoenix. And this is like 1955 or 56, 56. And my grandmother was always interested in spiritualism, and so she was a member or went to the First Spiritualist Church of Phoenix. And so my mom, who was not yet my mom because I wasn't born yet, came over to Phoenix and went with my grandparents to see this guest psychic or guest medium that was in. And my father at the time, he was a traveling minister for this NSAC, and he would go to visit all these churches around the country. So he was at this particular church that time. And so they saw I believe it was Saturday and Sunday, they went and my dad did a demonstration. And my mom's mom, Nana, we called her, she said, he's the best I've ever seen. This is unbelievable. And then lo and behold, the pastor of the church had invited my mom see if she wanted to be a blind date for the visiting minister. And that's how they met. It was like a dance on the Saturday night, and that's how
Oh,
they
that's
met.
so sweet.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the marriage only lasted 11 years, but hey, those things
That's
happen,
a
right?
lot. That's a lot.
Yeah.
We got you. That was pretty
Yeah.
important.
No, actually, I guess it was 13 years, so that's not too bad. It's longer than
Oh,
most
that's
marriages
good.
in the
Oh,
country
I've just
today.
noticed we've gone way over time. Oh my goodness. Well, what do you want people to remember from our conversation today?
Oh, just to be hopeful in spite of circumstance and in spite of tragedy, to carry on and to know there's a greater purpose and a greater meaning, and to keep, keep hopeful. I think I've known people who look at the glass as half full and half empty, and the ones who look at it as half empty, I feel bad. Some of them, good friends, have passed prematurely from, heart conditions or whatever. I'm not saying that's the cause, but I think they've had added stress and
Oh,
added,
sure.
and didn't live as happy or joyful of life as they could have. You're going to go through stuff, trials and tribulation, but there's a light on the other end of the tunnel too. So keep positive, keep hopeful, and just keep forging ahead because you're here for a reason.
All of us are here for a reason. And it's always a positive, joyous reason. We just need to find that reason. Beautifully said, dear.
Thanks for having me. Good to talk to you again.
It's very nice to talk to you. Stay put. I'm just going to tell everyone what we're going to be doing next week. Oh, that was lovely. So I'm so sorry, but we really have come to the end of we've actually gone off the end of our time, as we tend to sometimes when we're having fun. My beloved friends, this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. I'm so happy you could be here today. Please never forget, you are a powerful, eternal being. You never began and you never will end. And when you really understand all of the implications of that fact, it changes everything in your life for the better. Next week, our guest will be someone new. Her name is Julie Wignall, and she wrote a fascinating book called The Extraordinary Power of Fireflies. Now, her book is not about bugs, it's about people. I've just received it, so I've only begun to read it, and so far it looks great. Please join us next week and let's explore fireflies together. This week, our guest has been the medium and sensitive Mark Ireland, who has been with us for the fourth time. Mark has been a leader in the field of providing proof of afterlife survival, as he might well be, since, as you can hear, he's the son of the prominent 20th century psychic medium Richard Ireland. And he's about to write that book. We'll have him back as soon as the book is published. Mark is a co-founder of an organization I can't say enough good stuff about. It's called Helping Parents Heal. And as you heard, it's got like close to 37,000 members now. It's worldwide, and it assists bereaved parents in coping and then in overcoming the pain and remembering the joy. They have lost a child only briefly. Their child is in a wonderful place and they will see them again for sure. Mark has also done other things. He's participated in mediumship research conducted by the University of Arizona and the University of Virginia. And he's writing, as I said, a new book about his dad. His two existing books that I've read are Soul Shift and the Persistence of the Soul, which I especially loved that second book. And that all reminds me, of course, to just mention our great friend Craig Hogan and his wonderful, wonderful online source of all the information you're ever going to need about the afterlife. It's called Seek Reality Online. You're going to the afterlife whether you like it or not, because your life really is eternal. So you may as well learn all you can. It's like if you're going on the greatest possible trip, you need a little information. So just go there and learn all that you can. And that's all we really have time for. So just remember, this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes, and you have the right, the privilege, the joy of making the most of this coming week in our one shared perfect reality, always knowing that you are a powerful, eternal being, and you, most of all, in this entire reality, in this whole universe and beyond, you are above all infinitely, eternally, and perfectly forever loved.